All right. Well, good morning. Michael and Israel here once again for another Technician Tuesday. Thank you guys for jumping in with us. I see we've already got some questions. So I don't think we just finished up Virtual Fish Fest. First freeze, at least in our area.
Close. Anyway.
Close.
The winterizers showed up last minute, of course.
All right. Well, I think I'd tell you, I'd give you credit for being right. It was around Halloween as much as you can predict. I mean, I think if the almanac had called it, I think we'd call it good.
Call me farmers.
All right. We'll call you farmers. All right, guys, drop us some questions. We'll jump in with, looks like Timmy Taylor's already got one. We'll jump in with his, and then we'll definitely, I've got a couple, and we'll go for a little bit and see what questions we can answer. I'm not going to lie, I'm exhausted from all the lives last week, but man, that was fun.
It's been a long week.
That was fun. All right, let's jump in here. Do your technicians ever repaint, restore trolling motor lower units? If so, what paint and process do you use?
I can't say that I've probably touched them up for people, but I've never restored one per se. We've replaced housings, and I guess it depends on what it is, but I think I welded a skeg back on one a long time ago, but you have to be careful with those because they got, they have magnets in them, and the O-rings and the aluminum kind of heats up really fast. If it's a lower unit full of oil or something, it's okay. Like I'm welding a skeg on right now for a guy, but that oil keeps the lower unit from warping and it keeps it cool. And there's a lot more metal there to displace the heat. With a trolling motor, it's almost easier just to replace, the whole foot section of it. So that's my process. Well, I don't even do that, but I got a guy.
Gotcha.
I have a guy for that. I try not to do that anyway. I've done it, but I try not to.
Yeah.
It's too much stuff.
Painting a trolling motor, huh?
But I'm pretty sure they, I don't know if they use, it doesn't look like powder. It almost looks like some kind of rhino lining, or I don't know, maybe just a really thick polyurethane paint or something. I don't know.
I will confess I have not paid that close of attention on a lot of that stuff. I know, especially on the Kusa, it seems like quite a few trolling motors get banged up pretty good. But Timmy, what'd you do? What'd you do to that motor? I mean, I'm sure you're asking for a friend. All right. I got a couple that I missed, I think, last week. See about this. Why does Yamaha still use a composite gear in the balancer, which continues to ruin motors? I guess I would ask, does it actually, do you see that that's ruining motors?
It can, and they work really well from what I've seen. We don't have a lot of failures. And I've asked Yamaha this, and the reason they use it, the composite, for the spot that actually has the composite gears in it, because there's metal gears in there as well. But it's quiet. Otherwise, it would roar up. I mean, it would be in your ear whining all the time because it's right on the front of the engine. So,
gotcha.
Typically, what I see that kills the balancers, that particular part of the gear in the balancer, is impact.
Okay.
So they've got these counterweights on them, and you're going down a lake, 6,000 RPM. You hit something real hard, and they stop.
Gotcha.
And when they stop, it can strip the. Now, if you catch it pretty quick, so typically what happens is it starts making these little frays of plastic, and it goes down into the oil sump, and it stops the sump up, the pickup up.
Okay.
So the first time you get a oil buzzer, you stop,
Okay.
And I've actually cleaned out about 2 of them that went through that and put new balancers on them, and they were fine. So you just got to catch it before it gets too far.
So is that something? I mean, if you got a hard impact, where you got that scenario, is it worth bringing it in to
it
have,
is, and typically when it
it?
happens, you can start hearing the motor will get louder. It'll, you'll hear it. It'll be whining. So if you got a balancer that's whining, it's time to get it checked out.
Okay. So if you got particularly a hard impact or something that causes that immediate loss in RPM, and then you start getting oil alarm.
Yeah, and it's not doing its job anymore either, so it's not balanced. So you can feel the vibration too, and if you catch it early, it's the balancer is probably $600 and about a couple $100 labor, so you're in at $800, but it's better than the alternative.
All right. Let's okay. Follow up on the trolling motor question. Coating the trolling motor lowered unit with Line-X or Herculiner. Would that be okay?
I think it would be fine. I would just be careful about the seams, because
I don't know what
you want to be able to take it back apart.
Would that? I can't. Do you have an MDI? Do you have the built-in transducer on that motor? I'm pretty sure Timmy's got an Ultrex on his boat, right?
Yeah, if he's talking, I think he's
assuming that he's
another little boat or something.
Okay.
Because he's asked me about a 150 before, so he may be talking about a different boat. But what? You don't want to get on the bottom of your transducer, obviously. So you would take that off. But what I would do if you were going to do that, besides maybe prep it, sand it down. I don't think you really need to go to bare metal, but make sure it's good and clean. But I would put you some braided line around where all the seams are, where you would need to take it apart, and then put the Line-X on there, and then when it's still tacky, not dry but not wet, pull that braided line off of both sides. That way, if it ever needs to be serviced, you can still get into it and open it up without messing the liner that you put up on there.
Yeah, I would. So you said I do have the built-in transducer. So I'm assuming you're talking about your motor on your skeeter. Then I definitely do the best you can not to cover up that. Put any other barriers on that transducer. All right. Let's see here. Steven, 18 Skeeter ZX225. What is your best recommendation on dots shown on jack plate for top speed?
I would say a good place to start is probably 7, 8, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, you can go on up, but the higher you go up, it's going to start pushing the nose down, and then you may still have good water pressure and go into a turn and lose water pressure. So those are the things you've got to take into account. And then the further you get it out of the water, the more likely you are to swing a blade on a prop, which is why I tell everybody if raising it 2 or 3 dots only gets you, 0.2 or 0.3 mile an hour.
Yeah.
I just go back down where it was, and your boat's going to be more stable. You don't have to worry about water pressure as much, and you don't have to worry about the prop swinging the ears easily. Because the higher you go, the more flex that prop's going to have in it. So.
Okay.
But I would start off about 7. Is a good place to start off.
I guess if you haven't been in a conversation, so explain why that prop being higher. Why does that increase your chances of
So what happens? I like to use the analogy. Let's pretend this is a clothes hanger. Everybody's needed a clothes hanger to get in their car or fish a sock out from behind the washing machine.
For the 14-year-old that probably doesn't know what a metal coat hanger is, they'll just have to use their imagination.
Google it. Yeah, Google it or Pinterest, whatever you want to do. But when a prop's coming out of the water, it's going from a less dense material to a dense material. So every time it does that, it goes. So it's bending like you do a coat hanger, and eventually you get that coat hanger good and hot. It's going to break in half. So the same thing is happening to these props. They're making the props a little thinner, a little more performance oriented, and they're raising those motors up even from the factory, putting low water pickups on them so they can get because everybody wants to get to the hole first, and they need that 1 more mile an hour. But if you start running 2 blades out of the water at the same time, you get so high, you're unbalancing your
Gotcha.
your rotational mass as well. But the biggest thing is the more that thing flexes, the more it's likely you're going to get a stress crack in it. And then if you should probably be examining your props, every other time or so, just looking at them real good, because I've had about 3 or 4 guys actually come in with their props and they had hairline cracks in them, and it saved them, waiting on a prop or having to get their lower unit fixed because their ear slung off and not the cavitation plate off, or bent a prop shaft or tore the carrier up. So,
all right.
So you can usually see them, and typically you can get a nice strong flashlight and shine it on the backside if it's a real thin crack. So.
2006 Yamaha 250 XTR with 1,000 hours. Good, bad, buy, or leave. This is your shopping used motors, huh? What you think? 1,000 hours?
I guess I would find out if it's ever had a power head or a foot, any lower unit replacements. 1,000 hours, that's getting on up there, and it depends on
the price.
Well, and it depends on where it's at too, or what it's being used for. If it's on a bass boat, it's a lot of hours for a bass boat. That's getting to the end of its life more than likely, especially if it's a 2-stroke. So I'm not familiar with the XTR. Is that that might be offshore or something? So if it's something somebody used for, like a pontoon boat or like a center console that run at low RPMs all the time, it may have some life left in it. But you can usually tell. Best advice I have for anybody who's buying a used motor or a used boat, preferably a used boat with a motor on it, is to take it and go run it with a guy and go out there and run it for an hour if you got to. Sit there and idle, turn it off and let it sit there and heat up, get heat soaked, crank it back up and go again, and do some wide open runs. And then at least if the guy's trying to sell it because it's got a problem. Because most people, when they're trying to get rid of boats, they've got issues. And do a compression check, check the foot oil, look at the gear case, make sure it's not an aftermarket gear case. If you don't care if it's an aftermarket gear case, no big deal. But you get a lot of these aftermarket gear cases for $900, where factory ones, $2,800 to $3,000, and they usually perform a lot better. So,
Florida 4-stroke, lots of maintenance history, 5,000 asking price.
Right, and so
probably saltwater.
It's probably saltwater, number one. So that's one thing you got to take into consideration. A lot of those motors, when they get up to about anywhere from 800 to 1,000 hours, they've got these water jackets that cool the oil sump, and they start eating through, and they get paper thin, and you need to find out if any of that's ever been replaced, because if it hasn't, you might be the guy that gets stuck with the water in the oil and having to replace it on an engine that's been in salt water. And then pull the cowling off. That tells us a lot of stuff right there. And look at all the metal, make sure it doesn't have a lot of corrosion on it. If it's got a lot of corrosion on it and looks pretty nasty, even if it runs good, I call it having the consumption, because eventually it's going to be consumed to the point where there's nothing you can do with the block. And a lot of times the wiring harnesses are also, starting to get corrosive leaching up into the, into the connectors and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff to weigh when you're dealing with salt water.
Well, I mean, with that many hours, if you do have a lot of maintenance history, I mean, I'm assuming that means that that's just documented all the work that's been done. That's probably at least a good sign on that.
Yeah, and I've seen saltwater motors that were on, boats down there, fleet boats and stuff that had 3,000 or 4,000 hours on them. Yeah. But a lot of that depends on how they take care of it, how they
right.
flush it. They flush it with hot water when they get out.
I think a lot of that commercial operation stuff, so from a sales perspective, now Todd, if you're not familiar with what we do at Bucks Island, we're mostly freshwater bass boats, pontoons, your aluminum boats and stuff like that. So what I have a lot of that conversation with customers that they want to buy that 250 because they want the big expensive, or the big motor, the fast boat, but they're on a budget. And so I always like to at least throw out the option that, hey, there are some smaller, newer boats that are at a better price or that are within the budget. They may not go as fast and look as sexy, but they may not be in the shop nearly as much as something that's older. Certainly you're rolling your dice a little bit more on that.
And if you're from Florida, it might be.
And if you're on a big center console or something like that, and you don't have an option to go with a smaller motor, something like that, then that's
if you're from Florida and that's what it's going to be running in anyway, it might be okay for you. If you're from, freshwater area, and you're probably not going to get as much life out of that as you're going to want. So, but there's plenty of 250 4-strokes out there from freshwater that are probably going to be close to the same price, or it might be $1,500 more or something, but it'd be worth it.
All right, swapping an IO out for an outboard. That sounds like a fun project.
Either way, you'll be upgrading.
Okay, on a pontoon. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, IOs and pontoons. Me and those guys don't mix well. We're like oil and water.
I will say I definitely, of course, this year, the boat market is crazy. If you like tinkering with stuff like that, that may be worth playing with, but you may consider just selling off that pontoon and finding something. That sounds like a lot of work. Converting one over. Yeah,
because it doesn't have a normal transom on it either. So you'd have to figure out a way to make the transom work for outboard.
So, but again, I get it that, there's a lot of, I'm not a guy that wants to take on a project like that. But a lot of guys do. So there's a lot of good pontoon owner forums and stuff like that may be able to, but that sounds like an undertaking. And just out of my curiosity, where in Washington State are you from? I spent 4 good years stationed out in the Whidbey Island.
Wet years?
They were mostly wet, but the rain out there, when they talk about the rain all the time, it's very different than the rain here in the South. So
it's still wet.
We loved it out there. It's definitely a beautiful area. All right, let me see.
My niece lives there.
I need you to send me the best boat you have with a show on it, all the trimmings ready for tournament. Well, definitely I can get somebody in sales. We can reach out. We'll need a lot more detail on that. We've got quite a few boats with shows on them, all the way from a ZX 150 that we can put all the trimmings on.
This is a little baby show.
Yeah, it's a little baby show, but it's still a show.
Yes.
We got Sportsman 1710s with the 90 shows.
Yeah,
so I'm assuming you're talking fiberglass and one of the big Falcon skeeters or bass cats. Yep, the Avid. Yeah, we got the 200 show sitting back there. But most of our boats, bass style, you're from aluminum in the mid 20s all the way up into now with the high-end skeeters and bass cats into the 70s and the Falcon Predators. So,
and the bass cats, you can, depending on what you get on them, you can get up into the 80s.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you start putting electronics on, you can definitely
80,000s and 80 miles an hour.
Yes.
So
yes. Yeah. But we'll get. I'll get somebody to get in touch with you, or I'll reach out to you myself, and we'll see if we can get some more information there, David. All right, I got some long ones coming in. All right, my hose came off my air compressor on the Opti. I took it out this morning to run the motor to check it out. I noticed it was running really rough. Could the tracker valve on my fuel rail be bad and or diaphragm? I'm assuming that's supposed to be diaphragm.
Yeah, I know what he's talking about. All right,
Okay.
so this is what you need to do first. Okay, anytime a hose comes off of the air compressor on the Opti, that means it's getting all the fuel that it wants and no air. So these got two different style injectors. So they got an air injector and it's got a fuel injector. The air compressor, it shoots compressed air through those air injectors, and then the fuel, the fuel injectors on top of it. So it shoots fuel through that. It overcomes it. The pressure's higher on the fuel side, and it stratifies that mixture and makes it burn nice and clean.
Okay.
So what happens when your air compressor hose pops off? It no longer has that air, and it's just shooting raw fuel in there, and it's going to foul your plugs. Okay. So you need to change your plugs first, and then take it back out and run it. And more than likely, after you change your plugs, and be real careful or have them changed by somebody, because some of those Optis can be a booger, and you can cross the red, especially the bottom cylinders. So be super careful when you're doing it if you're going to do it yourself. But change your plugs, take it back out and run it. I bet your problems will be over.
All right. Well, hope that helps. So Eastern Washington. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You get on the other side of the mountains and it gets real dry out there. All right. I do miss. It's fun flying out there. The Cascade Mountains. That's a beautiful area. All right. I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. I think I might have one more. Fairly short one. How often should you change spark plugs on a Yamaha 200 4-stroke?
Typically, it depends on the situation, but freshwater, probably around 300 hours. If you do a lot of idling, excessive idling, graphing and stuff, you may want to change them a little sooner, just because fuel doesn't burn well at idle as much. If you're in saltwater, once a year.
Okay.
Or every 300 hours. So if you're a charter guy or you do any kind of guiding or anything like that, I would change them at least every 300 hours. And some people, put 300 hours a month on
Oh, yeah.
So it's all about how often it's out there in the salt air. So once a year for those guys, and I would add to that and say, if you're a saltwater guy, go ahead and change that water pump once a year. And the only reason I'm saying that is not necessarily because your water pump's bad,
right? But
it gives you the opportunity to drop that foot, grease the shaft, grease the splines, clean all the corrosion off the thread, so you're less likely to have a stuck bolt. And the stuck bolt's going to cost you a lot more than a water pump.
All right.
Up here, a semi-stuck bolt's going to cost an hour a piece. So down there, it's probably going to cost you a couple of hours at a really high rate.
Yes. So. All right. Okay. Let's see here. Those skeeter boats in the background. Yeah, we've got this one ZX225, and then we got a ZX150 somewhere back there. And I think we got a skeeter load in today. But
yeah, we did.
They're all sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to see.
We got one more right there. I think it's still.
Yeah, we got a ZXR20. We'd like to see a lot more skeeters in here, Timmy. And okay, not on a boat topic. If you flew growlers, nice. So I am old enough. I was a prowler guy, so I spent a lot of time flying EA6Bs. I got to work a lot with the growlers. Still doing reserve work, but man, low levels in Eastern Washington. Sorry, we can make a whole other discussion about that. But all right, anything else? I think appreciate everybody jumping in.
Voting day. We'll go try to vote. You're saying?
Yeah. Well,
the lines are long.
I thought maybe we should talk about politics because that seems to be what the internet is full of today. But
it's about as far into that as I want to go.
Yep. Go vote. Go vote. Let's talk about. All right, here we'll end with this one. Yamaha 2019 show 250 is showing no water pressure, but have water peeing out. Suggestions or okay?
I mean, I don't know. There's the good news about this motor is it's going to let you know if it gets hot. So the first thing I would check is, I don't know what you got, as far as boat wise, but I would take the cowling off. And sometimes if it's not the electronic gauge that you're reading, if it's a manual gauge, sometimes the hose gets run around and it gets caught in a cowling latch and it just pinches it. Okay, and then I've seen through the rigging tube where it gets in a loop and then it gets tight and it does this right here and gets pinched. And then I also see that sometimes the battery gets replaced and it sits on that. The battery sits on it, and after a while, it'll start losing water pressure over time, and eventually it's smashed so bad that.
So it's a Skeeter FX21.
Yeah, so I would check all those. First, the cowling latch, and then I would make sure nothing's been looped and pulled and caught in something, and check under your batteries. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it could be. Or if you're in a cold area and it froze outside and there was water in that gauge, it'll kill the gauge.
Okay.
So that's another thing. But the good news is not all hope is lost.
Yeah.
The motor really is good about letting you know when it doesn't have enough water.
So that water pressure gauge is just to make you feel better.
It does make you feel better. And then, if you got hydraulic jack plates and stuff, it kind of gives you a gauge of where not to go.
Gotcha.
So it's useful, but it's not the end of the world.
So you don't need to worry that motor's it'll shut itself down before.
Well, it'll be pitching, and it leaves the rest up to you for the most part.
Okay.
They don't want to strand you out there, but they do want you to be mindful that, hey,
all right,
your motor's hot.
All right, we'll end with this. Politics, which is better, Skeeter or Pascal? Well, that's a discussion for another day. So
the answer is in my head, but I'll let y'all guess.
Hey, our answer is whatever you want.
Whatever's best for you. We all have our favorites, so
that's a whole other discussion. But I tell most folks, especially with the amount of used boats that roll through us, picking a brand, it's tough. So we love the customers getting what they want. So.
Sometimes it all boils down to what color you like best.
Yes, and sometimes we try to talk them out of it, but at the end of the day, our job is to get you the stuff you want to get out and get on the water the way you want to do it. So, all right, guys, thank you all so much. Have a great day. Get out, vote. Good luck wherever you are, and we'll catch you next week for another Technician Tuesday. Thanks.
Cheers.